forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. I worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, to see my seed upon their walls. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God.
Daddy, you're the sweetest dad that I've ever known. Tears on your cheek on my first step on the floor, and you run to me when I'm out of control. Daddy, golden years that I treasure, you gently hold my hand, marching to the pedestal. You're proud of me after my junior school. Do you remember when the years were young? Our life was like a merry-go-round. Daddy, can you see? You gave me home, you gave me freedom, you gave me kindness and words of hope, and you put your trust to heaven above. Daddy, can you see? Daddy, your hair is now turned to gray, but still you have those smiles, those tears in your eyes, and you're still the loving dad that I've known. Daddy, the love you so is who I am today. It's a stronghold that I keep, inspiration to live. I'm forever grateful to you, Dad. Do you remember when the years were young? Our life was like a merry-go-round. Daddy, can you see? You gave me home, you gave me freedom, you gave me kindness and words of hope, and you put your trust to heaven above. Daddy, can you see? Daddy, can you see?
Greetings and peace profound. On behalf of Reverend Glenroy Clark and the Family Life Ministry Committee of the Lucea United Church, I take great pleasure in welcoming you to this, the 7th in our series, Family Life Matters. Welcome to those in the diaspora joining us on YouTube or via Facebook. Please continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel by liking our videos. Remember, you can also follow us on our Facebook page at Lucea United Church. It's Father's Day. A big shout out to all our fathers. Friends, it is so unfortunate that a good father is one of the most uncelebrated, unpraised, unnoticed, and yet one of the most valuable assets in any society. As we continue to transform lives for stronger communities, I maintain that if we are to become a nation of beautiful minds, there are 3 key societal members who are pivotal in making a difference: a father, a mother, and a teacher. And it's deliberate that I place them in that order. I believe that it was the poet William Wordsworth who wrote, and I quote, "Father, to God himself, one could not give a holier name." End quote. Let us pray. Faith of our fathers, we will strive to win all nations unto thee. And through the truth that comes from God, mankind shall then be free. Sovereign God, we thank you for our fathers. We ask that you continue to mold and shape us, granting that we may walk with you like Enoch, believe in you like Abraham, obey you like Isaac, wrestle with you like Jacob, know your hand on our lives like Joseph, speak face to face with you like Moses, win victories for you like Gideon, speak boldly of you like Elijah, worship you like David, see you high and lifted up like Isaiah, and carry our cross like Simon of Cyrene. Amen. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, some time ago, Reverend Clark had a week-long crusade. And one particular night, he called for anyone with special needs who wanted to be prayed for to come to the altar. So with that, Brother John joined a long line. And when it was his turn, Reverend asked, "So Brother John, what do you want me to pray for you?" Brother John answered, "You know, Pastor, I need you to pray for help with my hearing." So with that, Reverend laid one hand on John's left ear and the other on top of his head. And with the elders joining, he prayed in earnest. Elders anointing him with oil of olives. And a few minutes later, Reverend Clark removed his hands. He stood back and he asked, "Brother John, how is your hearing now?" Brother John answered, "You know, Reverend, I don't know. My hearing is actually next Monday. I am appearing before Justice David Fraser in the courts." Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if it's the same Justice Fraser that I'll be introducing to you tonight. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the honor and the privilege is mine to introduce to you the Honorable Mr. Justice David Fraser. The Honorable Mr. Justice David Fraser was appointed a judge of the Court of Appeal for the island of Jamaica on September 21, 2020. He was a puisne judge in the Supreme Court of Judicature of Jamaica from January 7, 2011 until his appointment to the Court of Appeal. On March 4, 2020, Justice Fraser was admitted as a Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. From January 2009 to December 2010, Justice Fraser was a senior legal officer in the Office of the General Counsel, CARICOM Secretariat in Georgetown, Guyana. Prior to joining the CARICOM Secretariat, Justice Fraser was from March 2006 to December 2008 legal advisor, criminal law section at the Commonwealth Secretariat in London, England. He joined the Commonwealth Secretariat on secondment from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Jamaica, where he had been Senior Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions Acting, involved in prosecuting some of the most serious crimes. Between September 2003 and January 2006, Justice Fraser was also the course director for criminal practice and procedure at the Norman Manley Law School. He is currently an associate tutor there in the law of evidence. Justice Fraser is a committed Christian who serves as a lay preacher and Sunday school teacher at the Bethel Baptist Church in Halfway Tree, Kingston. He enjoys reading, cricket, old cartoons, and good music. Himself and his wife, Gail, a teacher by profession, have 3 children. He is the consummate family man, a man of the world, yet not a worldly man. I am in amaze as to how this illustrious judge still finds time to even teach Sunday school. But then I'm reminded of the school of thought that says, if you want a job well done, ask a busy person. The others haven't got the time. Apart from that, his name precedes him from all angles. The name David, Hebrew in origin, has deep biblical roots. It means beloved and actually evolved from the Hebrew word dod, so close to dad. It must be then that a divine hand led Reverend Clark and the Family Life Ministry Committee to handpick Justice Fraser to present on the topic, Fathering in the 21st Century. I am positive that at this moment, Reverend Clark will not have to pray for our hearing because we're all ears. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Honorable Mr. Justice David Fraser. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Carr, for that very kind and extensive introduction. Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by thanking Reverend Clark and the committee for the kind invitation to share with you in this fashion. I met Reverend Clark at the funeral for my uncle, the late Lowell Fraser. You may know him as Mas Bob or Uncle Bob. That was in the summer of 2013. As Providence would have it, I saw him again in November of that same year when I came to Hanover to preside at the circuit court. We have spoken sporadically since then over the years, and I know you have the benefit of his powerful ministry and his gift of being such a brilliant speaker. So I have some trepidation now being in his virtual pulpit. So I ask that you keep me in your prayers during our brief time of sharing. While I was looking at the flyer advertising this evening, I noticed that you had a much younger picture of yours truly on the flyer. So, ladies and gentlemen, what you have now before you is a revised standing version. I am especially delighted to join you this evening, given that my father, the Reverend A. Oliver Fraser, his family grew up in Askinish, and in your church, your affiliate church, then Presbyterian, now united in the district of Askinish. He in fact came to faith in the Presbyterian church and only became a Baptist because he didn't have the academic qualifications required by the Presbyterian church to enter pastoral training. But I bring you his greetings as well this evening. So we have a very interesting and important topic to reflect on for the next few moments. The role of fathers is vital in families, communities, and nations. I do want us to have some interaction during this presentation. I know most persons are on the YouTube platform, and to facilitate some interaction, I have asked the moderator to place 3 questions in the chat, which I think you will already have seen. And at particular points, as we go through this presentation, I'm going to ask the host to share a few of the comments that you will have been making with me, so we can benefit from your thoughts. I'm now going to start the PowerPoint, and I trust that our time of sharing will be indeed very beneficial and inspiring for us all. Okay, so fatherhood and fathering in the 21st century. So these are the 3 questions for later discussion, which should be in the YouTube chat at this time. The first one, is it harder to be a good father than a good mother in today's Jamaica? And I'd like a brief explanation of your answer. Secondly, what are some of the characteristics of a godly father? And thirdly, how can the church best support fatherhood and fathering in today's Jamaica? Our background text is a well-known text, Ephesians 6 verse 4. I have 3 different versions here from the NIV, the New Life Translation, and also the Amplified Bible. The NIV says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. New Life Translation, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. And the Amplified goes into a bit more detail. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. That is, do not exasperate them to the point of resentment, with demands that are trivial or unreasonable or humiliating or abusive, nor by showing favoritism or indifference to any of them, but bring them up tenderly with loving kindness in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. There is what I will call a prevailing narrative. And it's amazing how the Holy Spirit works, because I listened this morning to United in Faith and heard your own Reverend Dave Hazel covering some of the same themes and issues that I have been led to share on this evening. And it's a well-known narrative, a well-known reality that today many fathers have a bad name, criticized for irresponsibility, for siring children but not taking any adequate care of them, sometimes for cruelty, physical, emotional, or sometimes even sexual abuse. There are some problems caused by absence, others by inadequacy of their presence. So some of these criticisms leveled at fathers make it easy to see how children could become exasperated. And the word translated provoke in other translations, the Greek root is also properly translated exasperated. The weaknesses in fathering is not a new or a recent phenomenon. In the Bible, there are a number of examples of fathers who had significant weaknesses in the way they brought up their children. We know, of course, the story of Isaac and Jacob, who showed favoritism to their sons, Esau and Joseph, respectively. And we recall all the familial strife that took place because of the way those fathers treated their special sons. David, my namesake, set a very bad example by forcefully taking Bathsheba from Uriah. And remember the story of how he got Uriah killed after Bathsheba was with child. He also did not punish Amnon when he raped his half-sister Tamar. And some of the commentators are of the view that Amnon behaved in this way because he would have seen the bad example of his father in the way he treated Uriah. Her brother, that's Tamar's brother Absalom, bided his time because David didn't do anything significant with Amnon. And 2 years later, he had Amnon killed and fled from his father's face. And Absalom later tried to take the kingdom from his father and was himself killed. So the sword didn't leave David's kingdom after what he did to Uriah. Then there is Eli the priest, whose sons Hophni and Phinehas were evil characters, did evil deeds. For example, taking the best portion of the sacrifices for themselves and also having unlawful sexual relations with the sanctuaries serving women. So there have long been issues with fathers and parenting, even in the Bible. There are some modern parenting challenges in the 21st century. What are some of them? First of all, it is much harder to control the influences that children are exposed to in this information age. In the olden days, when there wasn't this broad range of opportunity to communicate and all these devices, influences would be restricted to the persons that children physically came into contact with. So by restricting who your children would see, either at school or church or in the community, who would come into your home, you could control what they were exposed to. That is now very difficult, especially if they have any smart device, which is unregulated. Another interesting reality is that there is more information available now, but ironically, it is harder to find the truth. Everybody has a platform to share their opinion, whether it is true or wholesome. And of course, especially from our great neighbor up north, we now have the concept of alternative facts being a part of our lexicon. Thirdly, the gadgets that we have to make our lives easier and more efficient, if we are not careful, consume all our time. So we have email, which makes it possible for us to communicate instantaneously with someone else in terms of mail, compared to the olden days when people would write a letter, snail mail, that would take weeks to go and then come back. But what is happening is that because we have these devices and this opportunity, very often our workplaces or our friends expect immediate answers when we send an email or a WhatsApp or a text, or something is posted on Instagram or Twitter or one of these other social media sites. So there's been an explosion of information, an explosion of access to information, and very often persons can become consumed with just constantly being on these platforms because of the fear of missing out. And perhaps the most, what should I say, the most disconcerting thing of all is that we have more connectivity, but less connection. Haven't we seen people who have gone out to eat in a restaurant? That's before COVID, I suspect. Sitting down together out for a meal, everybody is on a device. Nobody is talking or sharing, enjoying the moment that they went out to share. So these are some of the modern parenting challenges that I'm sure you are only too familiar with. So now we come to the first question. And I would like if our moderator could share some of the responses I hope that you have been putting into the chat, given the situation we have with how fathers sometimes are viewed. And I think it is fair to say that fatherhood is not often seen in as positive as light as motherhood. I was in fact looking at something on TikTok recently where this young man was saying that Father's Day comes way down the line of significance in terms of celebration compared to Mother's Day. You were saying it comes after Halloween and all these other things. So this is a question. Is it harder to be a good father than a good mother in today's Jamaica? And briefly give some reasons, some explanation for your answer. Moderator, Brother Carr, do we have any responses that you can share at this time? I'm not hearing. I don't know if you are muted. All right, I'm not hearing, so I'll have to continue, and then perhaps later on we can get some of those responses, because I'm not hearing anything at this time. All right, so I hope there are some responses going into the chat, because this concept of whether or not motherhood is seen to be more valued than fatherhood is something that we'll have to wrestle with, I think, later on in the presentation. So the verse, yes.
Sorry, Justice Fraser, I was just having some technical difficulties.
Okay, good, you're here now.
But Tove Anderson is commenting on the characteristics of a godly father. She's saying
I don't want to go there just yet.
Just yet. Okay.
No, is there anybody who has
That
commented on
is the
this
only
first question?
that is the only comment I'm seeing at the moment.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll get to that, and I'd invite persons if they
Very
have
well.
a chance to also comment on the questions in turn, because I want to deal with them in turn. But perhaps towards the end of the presentation, if persons haven't yet commented, we can go back and look at these. So thank you very much. So I'll move on. So the verse speaks to the fact that, as Ephesians 6 verse 4, that fathers should not exasperate their children. But the truth is that fathers themselves can also be exasperated by things that fathers have to face. And the first point I want to raise is that the education system, in my view, assists girls better than it does boys. We know that girls develop faster, but significantly, boys tend to learn more through doing things, especially their hands, and working out things, making things, deconstructing things. And much of our education style at present is passive. It's sitting down, taking in information, sitting down for long periods, writing, and very often boys don't handle that so well. I remember even when I was studying and I was at law school, some of my female friends, when they got to the library, they would sit down from in the morning, they would not move, they would just be reading cases and taking notes. And the only time they would move is when they wanted to go to the bathroom, to the restroom, or they were going to eat. Those days we never had cell phones, so nobody was calling anybody. But for me, I would be there doing my work, but every couple of hours or so, I'd have to get up and walk around and probably talk to somebody, or get some movement. And I think that is true of a lot of the male of the species. And it doesn't help that most of the role models in our schools are ladies, because most teachers are females. So we have a situation where the boys are developing slower already, and then the style of teaching, format of teaching, tends to work better with girls generally. Of course, these are generalizations, because persons are different, but this is something we have to consider. I should say as an aside that a study was done some time ago with the use of patois, our native heart language, to teach. And it was shown that everybody did better when instruction was using or patois, but the boys in particular did so much better. So that's probably something we can discuss later on as well. Second thing I want to suggest that may exasperate men generally is that it is often easier for a woman to get a job than a man. And what do I mean by that? If a lady is prepared to do any job, even physically demanding jobs, which traditionally are reserved for men, she will be able to do it. There are a number of women nowadays who are, for example, even on construction sites. But there are some types of jobs that society has traditionally said are reserved for women. So you very rarely find, for example, a man who is a secretary, or a man who is, a household helper. And even when women go abroad to work, there's a greater range of activities, or professions, or occupations that are open to ladies. And so it is a little bit more difficult sometimes for some men, especially if they are not particularly advantaged in some ways, to get ahead. And thirdly, generally I'd say that men are more prone than women to what I'd call go off the rails and display deviant behavior. And we've had many persons learned in our society who speak about the socialization of our men, studies from persons like Professor Errol Miller, Dr. Herbert Gale, who identify many risk factors affecting the development of men, make a number of them not well adjusted as they should be. then there are situations which we have to acknowledge that there are some mothers who unreasonably block fathers' access to children or make outlandish financial demands on them. And you might be interested to know as well that a single man cannot adopt a child in Jamaica, but a single woman can. Obviously, there are certain fears and concerns which have caused that to be the situation. However, what happens to the single godly man who would wish to adopt a child, but the rules do not currently allow that? Now, I'm not by any means letting men off the hook. And I do acknowledge that there are reasons why some of these situations exist. But we need to realize that there's a spiritual battle going on for the soul of families, and that battle often runs through the father, who should be the head and priest of the family. And I believe that men and fathers are sometimes specifically targeted by the evil one, by the devil. If the head of the family is out of sync, it's going to affect everyone else in the family. If families are out of alignment, then communities and ultimately nations and the world will be in dysfunction. All because men are not in a position or do not assume their rightful place of leadership in the family. And the challenging problems don't only exist in the world, sometimes exist in the church as well. I know, for example, but of course this does not apply to your pastor, I'm sure. Let me make that clear. But even some male pastors struggle to maintain the discipline of the family altar in their own homes, even while they give their guidance to their flock that God has entrusted to them. So I've spent a little time on this, even though I don't think it was in dispute, that there are challenges in relation to fathers and fatherhood and fathering in our present context, challenges which have existed for a while, in fact, for centuries. But the verse goes on to speak about not just that the father should not exasperate the child. The verse goes on to speak about the fact that the father should bring the child up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. And that's what I call the power of godly nurture. You know, family psychologists and counselors tell us that there are specific benefits that come from a child interacting with each parent. The parent of the same gender is supposed to train that child in particular matters relevant to gender. So obviously you'd find that women will train girls about the intricacies of womanhood and what to expect, etc., how to be a lady. And men will train boys about manhood and how to become a gentleman. Now, the parent of the opposite gender, the psychologists tell us, are also very important. They have a lot to do with the nurturing side of the relationship. That is why you often hear about, you know, daddy's girl or mommy's boy. And if those relationships are healthy, I'm not talking about being suffocating or not appropriate. They have a lot to do with development of the child's self-esteem and empowering them to choose appropriate, well-matched partners later on in life. And, you know, there are many good and godly fathers, including single fathers, stepfathers, who father other men's children, just as we have good stepmothers who lovingly mother other women's children. But unfortunately, because of the prevailing narrative, as I call it, we often do not hear enough about good and godly fathers. So I'm now going to move to the second question, which is, I think we had a response from, was it from, I think, Tova Anderson? I don't know if other responses have come in. And so I want to hear of what you think are some of the characteristics of a godly father. Over to you, Brother Carr.
So Justice Fraser, we're having a response for the first question, and this is coming from Oniji Chikozili.
Yes.
Her answer is yes. It is harder for the fathers because generally we have low expectations of them. Plus, they don't have as many good role models. How to be a good father.
Okay. Some important points there. The lack of role models, which are some of the points I touched on. So thanks very much for that perspective. And any other on question one?
That's the only response.
All right, then you have one on question two, which is the godly characteristics.
Yes, so Tova responded, Tova Anderson, the characteristics of a godly father is that he provides for his family, loves his family, provides spiritual leadership in the home.
Okay, so we're talking about provision and spiritual leadership, two very important requirements and responsibilities. Thanks very much. Any other response?
I'm sorry, those are the only two so far, Justice.
Only, okay, all right, only two so far. All right, we'll press along, and perhaps more will come in later on. But thanks to those two, they're very on point and very helpful. So I want to focus a little on one biblical example of a godly father, and that is on Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus. And I want to use him as a model as we go through and look at some of the things that I suggest are good and godly characteristics. There are others, but I think these cover some of the main areas. And the first one has to do with presence. Joseph was present in the life of Jesus. You know, one of the challenges that we have nowadays, and it's been around for a while, is that very often men may father children, but they are not, and father in the sense of a biological contribution, but they may not be physically present to have an impact on the life of the child. Joseph was always there for Jesus, and we have the story in the Bible of all that happened that is recorded in his life. He was there with Mary, obviously, with Jesus, and was there able to teach him his trade, as we'll get to see later on, and was a constant presence in his life. And you'll see at the second bullet under this heading of presence here that I said below a certain quantity, there is no quality time, because as parents, you know, fathers and mothers, sometimes when we get very busy, we try to get ourselves off the hook by saying, yes, we're not spending a lot of time with our children, but the time we spend is quality time. And it is my humble view that if there's not a certain quantity, then the issue of quality doesn't arise. Now, as to what level that is, it will be different for, you know, different families and at different stages of the children's lives. But we have to be so careful, because again, the psychologists tell us that so much of the formation of the character of the child takes place in those first 5 years, when we don't think they're taking in a whole lot, but they're absorbing, like by osmosis, what's around them. And sometimes when we try to invest time later on, it's a little too late, because major parts of the character have already been formed or deformed, as the case may be. 21st century reality, technology which has its challenges, can also enhance presence. So there are situations where, for whatever reason, the father may not be able to be physically present in the home, But there are a number of fathers who religiously contact their children on devices, whether it is FaceTime, WhatsApp video, some other means, Google, to constantly have engagement and a presence and a dynamic, ongoing, growing relationship with their child or children. So technology is not all bad. It depends on how you use it. So there's presence. Then there's also productivity. We know that Joseph taught Jesus his trade. He taught Jesus how to become a carpenter. So he passed on the skill that he had to him. And I know Tova spoke about being a provider, and the traditional role of the male is to be a provider. And obviously, that's one of the main ways in which a father should contribute to the creation of value in the home. But I have this third point here, which is an interesting teaser. And I'm saying the traditional role of provider may be changing in the 21st century. It is an increasing reality that we have a number of ladies who have done very well for themselves, who are comfortable financially, who do not need the assistance financially of any gentleman. And they may become involved with a gentleman who does not have their level either of education or of earning capacity. Question: are we at the stage in society where we might be prepared to accommodate some role reversals, where perhaps the father can stay home and do more of the child care than the lady if she is earning significantly more than he is? I would probably want some discussion on that later on. Can couples, can society handle those changes? I know I've had discussion with some of my friends, and I know there are some women who instinctively have a problem with that, and others who may be prepared to accommodate that. There are issues which sometimes arise in terms of, question of whether the man feels secure enough, feels respected, etc. But a lot of things are happening in life which may cause things to go in that direction. I mean, as an aside, on the university campuses across the region, sometimes there is as much of a disparity of 75 to 25% in terms of in the favor of women to men. So there are significantly greater numbers of women who are entering the job market in high value occupations, and we are already seeing the imbalance in our society. I'm in the Court of Appeal now, and there's been a sea change in a matter of a few years, because there are now spaces for 13 judges. We don't quite have the full complement yet, but currently of that number, there are only 3 appointed men. So, and this is coming from a situation where up to probably 7 to 10 years ago, there was only about 1 woman on the court. So times are changing. What's the next characteristic I want to raise? Persuasiveness. What do I mean by this? It's not just about what the father might say, but the father should lead his children and his family by example, not just by saying things, but by doing the right things. Just said that values are more caught than taught. Joseph led his family by example. He was obedient to all that God told him to do, in terms of taking the child and his wife to Egypt to escape the wrath of Herod, and then to return from Egypt at the appropriate time. And we could see Joseph modeling, leading his family by example, by following what God told him to do. He said that children live what they learn, and they learn what they live. Integrity is consistency in conduct, guided by fundamental values, no matter the situation we find ourselves in. As churchmen, we need to have integrity both in and out of church, not just in what we say, but also in what we do at home, in the workplace, on the road, in the community. Do we break stoplights? Do we cheat the taxman? If we do these things, our children will discern an inconsistency, a dissonance between what we say and what we do. And two of the challenges of the 21st century world are relativism and situational ethics. It is now hard to define right and wrong. There are fewer and fewer absolutes in life. People often say, it depends, when asked whether a particular action or position is right or wrong. So we need godly men who will hold fast to the pillars of the faith and the values that flow from them. And the final thing I want to highlight in terms of a characteristic of a godly father is what I call persistence. A godly father constantly seeks the highest good of his children, no matter the situation. Now, going back to Joseph, the father of Jesus, it's interesting when you read the Bible, because sometimes we miss the pathos and the emotional realities of what the experiences that these persons went through would have meant. Joseph could not have had it easy. We, 2,000 years later, reading the Bible, we accept what the Bible says. We take it as given. But I'm sure many people would, to use today's parlance, have said that Mary gave him a jacket, and he would have to live with that question mark over his head. People probably, snickering as he went by. He also had to uproot his family and flee to Egypt to save Jesus' life. You'll also recall the story of him having to go in search of Jesus when they had started back home and he was not among the caravan. He turned back after 2 days travel and found him holding audience spellbound in the synagogue. So he was prepared to sacrifice and deny himself for the good of his son entrusted to him and his family. There are some examples from my own father's life, and my father is now a centenarian. He's 100 years old. I was with him today in Ocherus, and it was a joy to go to church with him. And being a Baptist pastor for many years, pastors are still not well paid. It was even worse then. He'd share with us in the family that there are times when he had one pair of shoes to do everything and go to church in and just go about generally, as we say, to dress and to judge in. He has shared experiences of when my sisters were going to school in Kingston, going to see them and then needing supplies, giving them the money he had and not having any money to buy gas to go back home. And it is the mercy of God that the fumes that were there took him back home. And there are other experiences, but the last one I'd share is that, my parents also share that there was a time when, after all was said and done, they had no supper one night. These are the kinds of sacrifices that they were prepared to make, father and mother, to ensure that their children got better in life than they did. And so I would propose that these 4 P's, presence, productivity, persuasiveness, and persistence, are some characteristics of a godly father, a godly parent. I'm now coming to question 3, and I'm conscious of the time, so we are almost at the end. And the question is, how can the church best support fatherhood and fathering in today's Jamaica, with all the challenges that have always existed and the new challenges which have been precipitated by the increase in communication and technology, and the world becoming even more of a global village with all the travel and the influences coming from all over. How can the church in particular best support fatherhood and fathering in today's Jamaica? Has anybody weighed in on that at this time, Brother Carr?
Yes, Justice Fraser. Latoya Jackson has commented, the church can support fatherhood and fathering by having outreach programs and getting the fathers involved in church activities.
Yes, that's a very good idea. Again, as I said earlier, men like activity. So I knew of a church some years ago who, men had a men's group, and they would go fishing, they would do construction projects, they would do a lot of things that had to do with action and activity. And it was while those engagements were going on that, mentoring was happening and relationships were being formed and strengthened. They'd have sporting activities as well. And one of the things we also need to remember is that there needs to be time and space for men to be alone with other men. Men will often speak when they are together with other men, but they're not going to say certain things when ladies are around. Women tend to be a little bit more open when men are around, but there are some things that you will not get men to share unless they're in the enclave of other men. So thanks for that idea. Any other suggestions?
Aileen Stevens is responding to what I believe would be question 2. No. Some characteristics of a godly father. I'm not sure, but she's saying
yes.
Fathers need to be made more aware of their other needs, that is, provide emotional, psychological securities through love, protection, unconditional care, and be a mentor, role model, etc.
Okay, well,
I believe that too many fathers are made to focus on providing material needs and often cannot. And that often can cause fathers not to feel that their primary role is for this.
Okay, very important perspective. Men are not just an ATM machine. It's not just the finances. Also, we need to be getting emotionally connected with our children. And one of the ways the church can also support fatherhood and fathering is to facilitate this openness for men to be able to become emotionally involved in child rearing, and to have sessions to deal with that, because we know that very often the ways in which men are reared discourage expressions of emotion, and it's something that we often have to unlearn as we go through life. And there are differences between men and women, and one of the things I didn't put it in the presentation, but one of the difficulties with modern day life is that increasingly equality is being equated with sameness, and we are equal but different. Ranges of similarities, but there are a lot of differences between men and women, and those differences are necessary. It is in the blending of the various differences between the men and women that we get the strengths and the unity and the oneness that was meant by God. And I mean, one significant difference is just a different number of words that the average man and the average woman speaks per day. I don't remember the figures now, but women tend to just share a lot more, so they're able to express and get into a lot of emotions more than men. And very often men are more economical in the way they communicate, and they want to get to the heart of the matter. They want the information and not so much the relationship and emotion that is conveyed with it. So we have to understand those differences. We also have to learn from each other, as men need to share more, and women need to also understand sometimes when men do not necessarily want to share in a particular setting. Ultimately, we learn and grow from each other, and the church is one of the best spaces within which those kinds of accommodations and understandings should occur. Any other contribution?
No, sir. I am not seeing any at this time. So.
All right, thank you. So I will move to the conclusion, which is that, you know, God is the ultimate Father, our Heavenly Father, and He's the ultimate example of presence through the indwelling Holy Spirit, productivity through having created this earth and made us as humans created co-creators, persuasiveness through sending His Son Jesus Christ to take on human flesh and model the perfect life for us, and persistence, like the loving Father in the story often called the story of the prodigal son. God the Father, like that loving Father, never gives up on us. So as a church, we should be at the forefront, providing counsel, opportunities, training, and support for our fathers and families, as together we strive to improve and enhance fatherhood and fathering in the 21st century. So thank you very much for listening and for sharing, and I am open for us to have some more comments and questions. Perhaps I may have said some things that persons disagree with or want to expand on. I think we can have some more of a discussion at this time. Thank you. You're muted, Brother Carr.
Honorable Mr. Justice Fraser, saying thanks is inadequate. I'm sure I speak for everyone on this platform when I say you had us totally immersed in what I would call a very in-depth presentation. It was compact, comprehensive, composite, and convincing. Only someone with a deep Hanoverian roots, I believe, could execute such masterly delivery. We cannot adequately compensate you, but I would like to leave with you my favorite Irish blessing. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be ever at your back. May the sunshine warm your face. And may the rain fall softly on your fields. And may God continue to hold you securely in the hollow of His hands. A big thank you, sir. God bless you.
Thank you, my brother. It's been my privilege and pleasure. And I pray that as we all contemplate fatherhood and fathering, we will seek God's guidance as the ultimate Father to guide us as we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to Reverend Clark and the Family Life Ministry who made this all possible. Thanks to Brother Troy, my producer. Thanks to all our viewers. Please continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel by liking our videos. You can also follow us on Facebook, on our Facebook page, Lucea United Church. Please remember you can continue to send in your comments. Good night, everyone. Blessings.
Good night. Blessings.
A son rarely tells his father how he really feels. A handshake or a pat on the back is all that he reveals. I'd like to right that wrong here in this little song. Thank you for shaping my life. Thank you for teaching me all you can. You are no ordinary man. No, no, no. You make me everything I am. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for showing me the way. And thank you for being there when I need you. Thank you for every single day. And if I'll be blessed with a son of my own, got my own bedtime stories to tell. If I could raise him half as well as you've raised me, guess I'll be doing pretty well. Thank you for your guiding hand. Thank you for making my dreams come true. You're an extraordinary man, and I hope you're as proud of me as I'm proud of you. Thank you for giving me love. Thank you for showing me good from bad. I guess I'm only really trying to say thank you for being my dad. Even though the years drift away, I never took the time just to say I love you, and I always have. And thank you for being my dad. Thank you for being my dad.